Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Craftsman Creative webinar. I am so inordinately excited to have you here today because of my special guest. We have the incomparable John Dye with us today. John is a dear friend of mine. He's one of the people that, like, he and his wife, Jenny, it makes me so sad that we're locked into our homes because I want to go hang out with them again soon. The last time we went out together, it was so much fun. But John is a marketing master. He's been in marketing for over 25 years. He's worked at some big companies that you have heard of, and I'm just so grateful. John, you're here. Thank you. Thank you for taking the time to do this today.
Darren, good to be with you, and thanks for having me. That's the kind introduction, the kind individual you are. I appreciate that. Yeah, thanks for mentioning Jenny. She'll be on a few of the slides that you see a little bit later on, and she, in her own right, is a marketing wizard and guru too. So I really like learning from her. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Should we just kick off?
Yeah, I do want to dive in with
Yeah.
one question real quick before we get to your presentation. You know, we are in crazy, crazy times right now. It's a little uncertain or very uncertain for some people, like how long this is going to be the new normal. How long are we going to be locked into our homes? How long is the everything going to be so uncertain and chaotic and crazy? And I would love to know from you, what is it that you've seen, whether it's online or in your business life or in your family life or whatever it may be? What's something that's been inspiring for you or that's given you hope through all of this as we've all been kind of dealing as much as we can?
Yeah, it is these are unprecedented times, just so much happening. And, as I think about it well, I can look at it multiple ways, but two ways I look at it. One, from a business perspective, some of the best things that have happened, I think, from an innovative perspective, are when their backs are up against a wall, right? They've got to figure things out. I remember early on during this pandemic, somebody had mentioned that, um, gosh, was it the law of gravity? I think was actually that theorem was actually created because somebody was stuck basically within a specific area, just like we are, and so they had time to think and ponder and consider things that they hadn't thought about before. So I think it's with every uh, I'd say closing door comes an open window, right? A new opportunity to think about things differently. So I would say embrace it and lean into it and do the best you can. For many of us, we're being disrupted. And we know from Clayton Christensen, disruption isn't always bad. This is a good chance for us to do that. From a personal perspective, this is unprecedented as well. And I think it's interesting to think through what that entails. Jenny and I have spent more time together, I think, in the last month than we have in maybe the last year, just because traditionally you have to leave your home to go to work and do different things. And so it's, I think, caused us to grow together. It's caused us both, I think, to be more introspective as well. But business-wise, I think lean into this and learn new things. I mean, there's so many freebies online now, Pluralsight and other online learning tools that have offered at least 30 days of free services to everyone. So lean into that, take advantage of that, and I think everyone will become better because of it.
Yeah. Oh, it's so great. Thank you for sharing that perspective because I think it's so easy for us to lose sight of the good things that are happening and the inspiring things that are happening and focusing on the negatives. So you've helped us already with giving us that perspective and that mindset. So we're really excited to learn from you today. I asked you to come on and share some of your wisdom about marketing, especially kind of around these crazy times. And I'm personally excited. I haven't seen your presentation or heard your presentation, so I'm going to be taking notes the whole time. But for those that are watching, please, throughout the presentation, leave some comments. We can see them here. And if you have questions, we'll answer those at the end. Mainly, probably John will be answering those rather than me because I'm here to learn as well. But John, I'm going to hand it over to you and take it away.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, one of the biggest things I think that as I wanted to enter into today is I wanted to share a few quotes that I almost actually, if anyone from work hears this, they'll say, yeah, that's a John Dyeism. That's something that he always says. And I think there are a few maxims about marketing that need to be understood, at least from my perspective, in the 25 plus years I've been doing this. One is do half as much as you want to do, at least twice as good or twice as well as you would do it. I often think that a lot of people equate activity with progress. And specifically in the marketing that I've been involved in with Fluid Studio, an advertising studio, I spent about 14 years there, then 7 years with Bonneville Communications. So we did a lot for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, nonprofit here in Utah. And then finally, the last 15, 16 months with doTERRA is undoubtedly, we always did, I think, more than we had to do. And that caused us to take our eyes off the prize a little bit of what we wanted to have done, what the success factors were. So again, activity does not equal progress. And I think it's important that people think through that. So as we have my slides up, thanks, Darren, for being my advancer today. I wanted to hit just upon a few things. And first of all, wanted to share with you a little bit about my history, who I am, what I've done, and kind of where my passions are, because I think marketing, a very broad subject, as we think through this, I think there's a lot of things that people do and areas where they gravitate toward, whether it be, web, online, email specifically, social media, influencer marketing, et cetera. So I'd say my personal passion is really in the influencer space and social media space. This first graphic that you see, specifically when I was at BondCom, I had a chance to work with my team to curate a pretty large list. We had over 2,000 influencers with an aggregate reach of over 125 million. And, as you think through influencer marketing, that's morphing right now because of the times we're in as well. But I just read an article about that area of marketing going through a quote unquote recession. People are starting to determine what influencers are really worth. But just a great opportunity to build relationships with these people that have a strong penchant and affinity for a similar cause. I think influencer marketing is great. As we move to the next slide, to the world's largest live nativity, that was, I'd say, a highlight of my career. That was December of 2014 it would have been. Had a chance to work with the good folks at the Harmon brothers. They helped do a lot of this, but again, it was for the church. Just an incredible opportunity to break that world record. Then Jenny and I had a chance to really be involved. BondCom, of course, was a sponsor with the YouTube live stream for Light the World. That was a couple years ago, and we had a lot to do there, and that was just really, really fun. If you advance to slide, I believe it's 5, just YouTube space in New York City hosted that. It was just incredible. Loved our time there. We got a lot of, I think the influencers we had together there had 25 million plus in total influence, and just had a good time shining light on a good cause and doing service throughout the world. So really that's what drives me. And as I think through, as I love talking about marketing, I love talking about outreach, the nonprofit, the philanthropic side of things is what really, really brings me back home. So today, though, as we go to slide 6, the things I want to talk about really are, I've titled this Instant Impact: Capture Attention and Share of Wallet Using Tried and True Marketing Tactics. Now, again, the majority of what I'm going to talk about today will float around some of my passions, influencer and social media, but I'll try to hit on multiple other areas and talk about deployment and different ways that you can do things that I think have been effective. The other thing I want to give a caveat too, because even though I'm the one speaking here, I don't want to say that all of these ideas are things that I've come up with from a solo perspective. I mean, it takes a team to really do that. And I think I'd be remiss if I said this is all John Dye, because it's not. Many smart people that I've worked with over the years and decades have helped refine this, and sometimes I'm just the voice of it. But the 3 things I want to focus on as we go to slide 7, first of all, how to define your marketing initiative success succinctly. How do you do that? I think many people start doing things without having the end in mind, to borrow something from Stephen Covey. They don't understand what success looks like. So I've got a little chart, a one pager that I'd like to share with all of you, some things that we look through that I think are very helpful. Secondly, as we go to slide 8, how to organize resources and content effectively. I think that's really important, as many creatives like to think outside the box. Sometimes thinking how they'll deploy things and how they'll put things out there, it's, hey, I've created it, now let's get it out into the wild. Well, there's a method to the madness of actually deploying content and being able to have it build or deploy in order, kind of like a booster rocket. You initially launch something, and then a second booster takes place, and third, et cetera, different phases that an initiative should go through if you want that longevity and just not to have an overnight sensation. And as we go to slide 9, then, how to distribute content efficiently. I think that's really important. So we'll start with that first one, slide 10, how to define your marketing initiative success succinctly. So Darren, if you want to bring up that Google Doc that I sent to you, that would be very helpful. This is something that was created by a group of us, specifically at doTERRA, where I currently work. I think before you actually start into marketing, one of the key and most important things to do is really define what success will look like. As we look, I'm going to look at my notes on my phone here, but as we look at that specifically, some of the key things to think about are, who are the major players? That's the top piece that I've got there. But identifying who's going to run in what swim lane, or who's going to swim in a swim lane. Understanding who does what, so that, number one, you don't step on each other's toes, but number two, you can be much more efficient and effective if everyone knows what they're expected to do. Just like a great baseball team or a football team, on football teams, 11 players out there on the field, if they all do the things that they're supposed to do, which is a very, very simple and very narrow request for each play, they see success as a team. So again, assign that, make sure people know exactly what they're expected to do. Then we go through some things down below. One, business objectives. What do you want that to do? How should that move the needle for your business? Make sure you write that out and you have that very clear, and people look at it and people approve it. Second, marketing objectives. As you look through that, make sure that you understand what those marketing objectives are that you want to have done, because that is key and crucial in understanding success as well. I just had it blip off my screen, Darren. So read that for me if you can. What's under marketing objectives?
Audiences.
Okay, so define your audiences. Make sure you know who you're speaking to. This is huge and crucial and critical, just because of the fact that the way you're going to talk to a millennial or Gen Z audience, and also the platforms you're going to utilize to talk to them, are going to be totally different than to speak to a Gen Xer or somebody of a different generation. So again, know who you're talking to, and that'll help determine the tone that you want to use. And then Darren, the one below that. Yeah, exactly. So one key thing in marketing, and I think everyone would agree, is not only do you need to push content out, the appropriate content, the appropriate message to the right audience at the right time, but you need to be able to deconstruct that from an analytics perspective and say, what worked well? We pushed a post out on Instagram in the afternoon of Thursday. How did that do versus something on the weekend? Or just being able to look at the big picture. I think being analytical about it is key and crucial. So even though you just push content out, doesn't mean you're done. That's only the beginning of this marketing journey that we're on. You have to go back and do an autopsy on how it did. And below that, Darren? Okay, so distribution, that's key and critical, because as we talk about all the different ways you could get things out, I've alluded to things earlier, but it could be a blog post, it could be something you put up on your web, an email, social media, it could be any of those things through earned or owned media. You've got to make sure that you understand what is being distributed when. And then the last one that you mentioned, of course, was the rollout cadence. So understanding when you want different things to hit And again, like I said before, those booster rockets, utilizing that analogy, something should deploy after the initial stage, and then maybe there's a third stage, a fourth stage, etc. So key and crucial things to think through. So again, all that ties into how to define your marketing initiative success. And I think that is key and crucial because again, if you don't know what you're trying to do before you start in on everything, even creating content, anything could be successful. But at the end of the day, you should be spending your time to actually move some sort of needle, to make some sort of difference. And not defining that up front is an Achilles heel for many companies. So, number one, do that. As we move to slide 12, Darren, talking about how to distribute content efficiently. Um, you know, Slide 13, this is where you have a graphic that I borrowed from somebody online, by the way, and I'll provide that URL. But this is something that I thought was very good, and I wanted to share it with everyone because for me, being able to understand all the different areas that you can put content is very important. And again, this should be maybe 101 to many people that are marketers already. But if you're a content creator, not knowing the best distribution platforms and channels for your content is going to be important, I think. So if we start at the top, I'll just go through each one really quick and maybe just discuss each one of those and then holistically how they all come together. So integrated planning. So we talk about always on campaigns, things that are evergreen content. Sometimes, and I'll talk about this a little bit more. I've got a slide I think that really hits on this later on. But these are the always on campaigns. They're the things that bring in either traffic or money daily. You need to have those underlying bottom line campaigns that are always running on whatever platform it might be on. It might be organic or it might be paid, but something that's always happening to build your brand and to bring in the dollars. Content marketing, obviously creating content that tells your story, that builds your brand and does all those things. And again, there's multiple different ways you can distribute that, but you need to create that content on a very good cadence, a very regular cadence to make sure people come in. SEO, that organic search piece, that's key and critical, of course, as you think through what are those pillars of your brand going to be? And how do you create the content and what are those keywords you need to use to be found by people when they're searching for things online? I won't go too much into this, but there's multiple tools that can be utilized out there, but understanding what your brand is known for and the questions that bring people to your brand are key and critical in that area. Paid media, that's the next one in light green. As we think through paid media, this is a bit more challenging. I haven't spent a lot of time in this area, but I've seen people who have done it and done it very well. And when you do it well, you look at the ROAS, the return on ad spend, ROAS, you're talking sometimes 100x what you spend. Any marketer would tell you this, any business owner, if I spend $1 and I get at least $1 back, I'll probably keep doing that to some extent. But if I can spend $1 and get $10 back, oh my goodness, I will keep dropping money into that machine forever and ever. And again, some of these, the return on ad spend for some of the things that people are doing, 100 times. So it's crazy not to do that. Of course, as you spend more, eventually you'll saturate that term or that paid keyword, and eventually that'll start going down. But finding that key spot where $1 in means at least $1 out is key and crucial. Social media marketing, one of my passions. Just being where people are. This is relatively recent in the marketing ecosystem and great place to be. Whether it's Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, TikTok obviously now has come onto the scene, but there's a lot of different places to be in that social media marketing ecosystem. Email marketing and marketing automation. Some people say this is the grandfather of marketing. It's one of the earliest things that arose, I'd say, in this marketing ecosystem. And guess what? It's still one of the best. I think of the companies that I've been at, and whether you're after awareness or share of wallet, email is one of the best performers, hands down. So you can't forget about that. And then looking at the multiple channel analytics, that's key and crucial as well, because understanding where you're bringing people in, which channels are bringing things in, and spending your time on those channels that bring in the most, whether it's awareness or money, is important for each company. So anyway, that kind of builds, I think, the digital experiences ecosystem as we think through marketing. There are other types of marketing though as well. Experiential marketing. Think of an event that you go to, whether it's a convention or even a concert, and just all the things that happen there, right? To get people to spend money, whether it's on merch or whether it's on accoutrements that they provide there. There's so many things that are available in person. I've just hit upon a lot of the digital ones because that's where I spend the majority of my time, but that's good. Now, let's go to the next one if we can. I'll do a quick time check. How we distribute content efficiently. And I will be the first one to say that what I'm about to share with you is something that I helped put together with, again, a larger team. This team was led by somebody named Steve Babcock. He was the former chief creative lead at VaynerMedia, so Gary Vee's company in New York. But he helped us put this together, and I thought, wow, just a crazy awesome way to approach distributing content efficiently and effectively. So if we go to the next slide, whoops, I may have, get to the one that has Kinko's and Netflix if you can. I may have left a few extra slides in there. Okay, we're there. One thing, when he came in, he did an audit of a company that I was at, and he said the way that different areas of the company interacted with the creative area or the advertising or marketing area was very similar to a Kinko's, where you'd walk in, you'd make your order, and then you'd step back, you'd sometimes look over the person's shoulder as he or she was making copies like they would in Kinko's. And it was just, I'll tell you what to make, you make it, you deliver it to me, and we're done. That's our transaction. And sometimes you see this specifically with in-house marketing agencies. It's like, hey, I'm just here to tell you, or excuse me, to service you, to do what you want to do, and then go from there. And I think the thinking has to change a little bit. If you're a true marketer, you have some creativity. You don't want to just be told what to do. You want to be told, maybe that one pager that we just went through, give me that. Help me understand what the business objective is. Just give me that filled out, and I'll come up with the marketing objectives and the rest of that. I'll figure out who the audiences are. I'll do that. I'll present something back to you. So he said, let's migrate, or let's evolve from a Kinko's mentality to a Netflix mentality. Now, a Netflix mentality it's much different. We'll talk about that in just a moment. As we know, Netflix is this big, huge media conglomeration that has multiple quote unquote shows on at any time that you can watch. And no matter what your interest is, they're creating content all the time that they upload. So somebody who likes documentaries, guess what? There's something there. If you like scripted drama, it's there. If you like, and any type of genre is available there. And so let me walk you through this. If we go to the next slide here. This is, again, from a company that I was at, worked with others on this paradigm, but we basically have promotions tied to each month of the year. So that's what this represents. So in April and May, all throughout the year, you have specific promotions tied to each month of the year. So if you go to the next slide, we talked about creating shows, a program guide very similar to a TV guide or something, and that's what we're creating here. For those of you that are old enough, you might remember a TV guide. That's kind of what you'll see start to shape up here. But as we look at shows, these are things that would make people be interested in whatever content that we're trying to get out, specifically about the company. So whether it's about something about the ethos of the company, something about how the content, or excuse me, how the product is distributed, or the personal and humanizing stories that we're creating through the content. All of that is being encapsulated in these shows that you see to the far left. Some of these could be weekly shows. That green piece that you see at the very top, the green bubbles, those are our weekly shows. Some might be every other week, like the second line. Some might be once a month, like the yellow one. But you're creating content on a regular basis around a certain specific subject. Again, whether that's humanizing, and it shows kind of like the humans of New York. That would be an example of this. But you tie it into something, a specific aspect of the company or corporation that would lead people in and give them a life of their own. It's not just all about sales. It's just not all about things that the company wants to talk about. It's actually the benefits and the things that the audience wants to hear about. So again, it's content that is easily consumable. If we go to the next slide, you should see at the very bottom a brief. Okay, so in addition to this regular content that's being put out from a King's perspective, weekly, every other week, or monthly, tied around certain themes that are key and important to the company, you also might eventually have these campaigns that need to come up that you need to do. So there's a campaign brief built around that. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see that a campaign is built around that brief. And so what happens there is you might have a campaign that just has a short shelf life, so to speak, versus these evergreen shows that are happening, the ones in the dots, that continue throughout and that are evergreen. And obviously you have metrics tied to them. So if they, just like a television show, if Seinfeld didn't hit a certain rating, guess what? They would exit the next year and they wouldn't renew it for the next season. Anything like that. This is a similar mentality where we're putting out content and we expect engagement, we expect sales, we expect certain things from each of these shows, metrics that we set up at the very beginning before the show even debuts or pilots. But then at the end of the day, we continually measure it and dissect what's happening so that we see if we want to fund another season or not. And go from there. So an example of this might be Wellness Wednesdays, as we work through health and fitness and talk specifically about that health and fitness lifestyle. We tie products into that as well. But every week we're checking to see what those quote unquote ratings are, right? Based on likes, comments, shares, sell through, engagement. How long do they stay on the video? When do they drop off? We continually learn, optimize, and iterate around those things. Those are the key, analytics and attributes we look at the show and then go from there. Now, Darren, we're still on this slide though, and I wanted to say one other thing about this. If you do this right, and we're still optimizing it, but if you do this right, when you throw in a campaign over and you overlay that with your evergreen schedule like you see, you should be able to talk about that product or about that initiative naturally within each of those shows. So if you look closely, you'll see a red circle around each of those bubbles. Meaning, if we're going to talk about a Christmas campaign and we have an evergreen show going on, you should be able to talk about that campaign within that show. Find an angle to do that so it feels natural. It doesn't feel like it's a 90 or 180 degree differential from the show itself. Figure out natural ways to tie that in so that it just builds up, they build upon one another and synergize. It doesn't feel like it's an unnatural pairing, so to speak. So anyway, that's kind of the TV guide, Netflix mentality versus kind of the Kinko's mentality of just the one-off, hey, I'm here to service you, bring in what you want, I'll create it, I'll output it, and I'm more of a production person than I am a creative. And so that's been very helpful for where we've been at. So that's really, I think, the majority of the things I wanted to say. I think that's about half an hour, but we have some time for questions. And, I'll put a link to the thing that you shared originally, that Google Doc with the marketing objective, business objective, audiences, all that stuff. I feel that's been helpful to me in my careers. I've been able to sit down with people and really extract that information from them before we begin, because at the end of the day, you're not a mind reader, right? You need to understand what the objective is and what key and critical component that person, what needle they want to move. And once you find that out, you can then ask the salient questions that will bring you to a definition, which creates a brief from which you can brief then your creatives. And it really helps give them a sandbox that they can play in. And I think that helps the creative output that much more.
Awesome, awesome, John. This is like my mind is spinning at 100 miles an hour right now because I was literally talking about this morning in the coaching group that I run on Facebook about how, as I've been diving into marketing for Craftsman Creative, it's immediate. Like it happened so quickly that I got overwhelmed by it all. And then I saw that last that last slide. It was like, that's it. That's what I'm experiencing right now. It's the overwhelm because it feels like each one of those shows is maybe a different platform. Is that a safe way to talk about the show?
Yeah, you could, and that's what's beautiful is each show could have a different. It could be platform based, or in our case, we use Instagram and Facebook to tease and lead into YouTube, which the long forms on YouTube, the short form, kind of the teaser trailer type of stuff is on the shorter attention span, I would call it, platform. So everything levels up into a larger space.
Okay. So while those that are watching are putting their questions in, and please do that because we've got John just for a few more minutes, so we want to make sure we answer your questions. But I do have one. If you're looking at this and you're going, man, that's so overwhelming. I'm only on one platform or two platforms. I only have one or two shows. I have never even thought about campaigns or briefs or all this other stuff. It could immediately get overwhelming. So like what's the thing that you would start with? What would you do first? How would you answer that question? And it's really for me. I want to know, what should I do first?
That's a great question. And one thing I often say to the team is crawl before you walk, walk before you run, right? And as you think through that, most people I think have some sort of an idea of where this content might most resonate, depending on what the end goal is, whether it's to bring brand lift or to bring ROI, return on investment and cash flow back into the company. So I would say trust your gut. But again, we have unlimited wants for limited resources, whether it's time or money, right? And so as you think through that, trust your gut, first of all, but do that in a way that makes sense. Meaning, if you know something about Facebook and Instagram, it's probably a good place to start and test it out. I am a big fan of doing sprints, just testing out hypotheses and saying, gosh, let's try this bit of content on these two platforms. But guess what? We're only going to create enough for 2 weeks. Then we're going to go back and look at how it did and was there an ROI or did it bring more brand awareness? And then do that in short sprints and then maybe start adding, I call it layers to the onion. So if you find out that Facebook and Instagram work, well, maybe we'll add email into that and maybe we'll add Snapchat or TikTok a little bit later. And, what does our web presence look like? But, I think it's key that you just think through that. And again, trust your gut. I think most people, their gut instinct is pretty good. But again, crawl before you walk and walk before you run. Think through where you think naturally that'll do best. Test it out, measure it, and then add more in.
Awesome. And to me, that almost harkens back to what you said early in your presentation, which is defining success. And so if you go into a platform and you're just like, well, let me play around here, if you don't have any way to measure whether or not it's working or successful, it's easier to kind of fall off that really quickly. And I know I've done that numbers of times. So
Yeah.
I'm scared to jump back into TikTok, but maybe someday.
Hey, I want to see that duet that you do with somebody.
Oh boy. Love it. I'll work on that. I promise. So last chance for questions before we go. But John, this has been amazing. Just in case any other questions are going to pop in, I'd love for you to take a second, let people know where they can connect with you online, anything you'd like to point them to website-wise or link-wise. I know we'll share that one link in the comments in a minute, but anywhere you want people to check you out?
You know what? I'm dyejo on Twitter. and love that platform. I'm not as good as my wife, but that's where we met each other. So that's always got a special place in my heart.
Yeah.
On Facebook, um, I am about out of friend requests. I seem to bump up against that 5,000, but would love to connect with you guys there. Instagram, my Instagram game has fallen a little bit, but I'd love to be on Instagram too. LinkedIn's a great place. And I'd highly recommend people get involved on LinkedIn just from a professional networking perspective. That's a great platform as well.
Awesome. Awesome. John, this has just been a pleasure. It's been a delight to like learn from you. I've always secretly wanted to, but have never never asked. So I'm glad that I did, and I'm glad you took the time to come on here. I don't see any questions, but if there are that pop up over the next week or two as people are watching this, not live, we'll be here. We'll be checking in, and so make sure to tag John in your questions, and we'll come back and answer those. But John, thank you so much for your time. Thank you everyone for watching and joining us today with this webinar. We'll be back in another week or so. It's quarantine time. Schedules aren't real anymore. So
That's
maybe
right. We
maybe
don't know
next
what
week,
day it
maybe
is.
not. Yeah. It's been awesome. Thanks so much, John.
Hey, thanks, Darren. We'll see ya.
Take care.